All right, welcome back. Well, as we've mentioned, today marks 22 years since the 9/11 terror attacks. If you were old enough to remember that, you may remember that this tragedy actually united our country during that time in the days and weeks following the attack. And today, Michelle Essery, the owner of Fullwell Neurofeedback and Counseling in Hoover, joins us now to talk about how shared experiences can sometimes bring us closer together. Michelle, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Claire.
So we've got a couple of points I know that you want to share with our viewers. We were talking earlier, and you said that stressful and traumatic events sort of shift our focus and priorities. So talk a little bit about this.
Yeah, we have kind of these everyday life stressors that fill our lives and our heads a lot of times, right? And when we have major life events or things that kind of bring us into face-to-face contact with maybe something that's life or death or something that would be really traumatic or where we might lose somebody or something important to us, that will often shift our focus, right? We'll begin to prioritize these things that are really the most important to us. It makes us take a look at our values, who's important, what's important, and really shifts our focus to those primary things.
And one thing you mentioned earlier, a lot of times we will often drop the drama, and that just really stuck with me because things that seem important and significant sometimes aren't in
Yeah.
during traumatic events like this.
Absolutely. That conflict you had with your coworker really doesn't matter when something really significant is happening. You're like, you know what? That doesn't matter all that much.
Yeah. Okay. And so the next one, shared experiences can break down barriers.
Absolutely. And this is kind of true across the board, but when we have something major and emotional that's happening, and we are in it together, there's something really different about that experience. We're sharing the same experience. So we might have everything else not in common, right? We may come from different backgrounds, or we may come from different socioeconomic places, or we may have different opinions about things. But when we share this experience, it can really be something that bridges some of those gaps that we might have in day-to-day life. But when there's something higher or more important going on, it might make a bridge for us where we weren't expecting it with people maybe we wouldn't expect to connect with. We're able to connect.
And I feel like that leads us into the next point about common problems and enemies can sort of come alongside one another. Who
Yes.
might have been on opposite sides of an issue can really come together and support each other.
This is true for families and couples the same way it is for major life events, right? When we have something that we are commonly have that we are working towards, it's almost like we become allies, right? We become allies in a common battle. And it can make a huge difference when, again, those other things sort of fall by the wayside, right? Like the things that maybe I'm not saying long term you don't need to still deal with some of those things, but for a while it can really bring people together and it can help to again shift those priorities. Like what really is important? This person and their life is important, maybe not their opinions or their views that might be different than mine. And us going against this thing that together, coming together, you wouldn't believe what a common problem can bring incredibly different people together.
Yeah, and I love that. And then the last point, revisiting what really matters and just taking that opportunity to sort of reflect. And I think that's one thing that is important for us to do on 9/11 is to think back and almost remember the good. I mean, it's such a horrific experience, but if we try to think about what was good at that time, I think that can really help.
Yeah, I think major events like this in general, one of the best things to do on a day of remembering, Memorial Day is another event like this, right? Especially if you've had a family member you've lost. You have this opportunity to look back and revisit those connections or those shifts in priorities. You can think back and think, you know what, when this happened, all of that stress at work didn't matter as much. The fact that this and this and this were happening in a school setting didn't matter as much. What mattered was I was able to be with my family. They were okay. They were with me. I was able to be there for my neighbor who lost somebody. I was able to, the things that are kind of the broader scale, more important things, we can
Mhm.
take a moment and remember how it felt to prioritize those things. And that can really be a cue for us to think, you know what, I want to reach out to my neighbor today again. I haven't talked to them in a while. Or I want to spend some time cutting out everything, turning off my kids' games and spending time with them today because I remember how important they were to me.
Yeah. And even as people, as we're sort of relating this to 9/11, but you've also related this to other experiences, maybe the loss of a family member, and just,
Yeah,
that can also, a lot of people I know can probably relate to that, and just sort of the sense of community you almost feel after that, and the important times with family and stuff. I think we can really take a lot away from that.
absolutely. And 9/11 did this for our country more than most events I've seen, right? There really
Mhm.
was a time when everybody came together, and that's really incredible.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Michelle Esri, the owner of Full Well Neurofeedback and Counseling in Hoover, we appreciate you being with us today. Thank you so much.
Thanks again for having me, Claire.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back after this.